Hello fellow humans and welcome to the Madhouse. I'm Josh and today is my review of The Long Utopia by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. I shall attempt to leave out as many spoilers as possible, but be warned there will be a few, mainly because some of the concepts that excited me most are quite central to the plot and I just can't not talk about them, but I'll try to leave them till the end. Now, as with the rest of the Long Earth series, the cover is absolutely lovely. The dust jacket is really pretty and it shows the chain of the Long Earth, but then the actual cover itself is, in my view, much prettier and just absolutely stunning. That brilliant blue cosmos. And also, I can never remember what this bit's called, the spine is lovely as well. Also, another thing about this is that the main appeal of the story is, again, the idea surrounding it, the whole chain of the Long Earth. That is the main appeal of the entire series, and I find it fascinating. The idea of alternate universes has always been something that drew me in. Now, I really enjoyed the book and I would rate it at a 4.5 stars perhaps, but not quite the full 5, and a 5 exclamation marks for originality and a 5 robots for fitting into science fiction tropes. Now, the originality and tropes together tend not to make that much sense, but once I've explained it you'll see why. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I mention Lobsang quite often. If not, or you didn't really pay attention to those videos, Lobsang is my favourite character. He is the Tibetan motorcycle repairman reincarnated into a supercomputer. Practically limitless potential. And this book is mainly his story. But it's also the story of his wife, Agnes, who isn't really a wife, but a biker nun who he caused to be reincarnated into a similar supercomputer, so that there would be someone to keep him in check. And their life together. Lobsang fakes his own death and retires deep into the Long Earth, adopting a son and setting up a farm, which sounds pretty idyllic, and it's an interesting way of exploring Lobsang's personality, because what we know about him from the other books is that he has this big ego thing, that he has to be the one to save humanity. So for him to settle down on a farm, you know there's something interesting going on in his mind. And it's such an interesting character to explore. Very philosophical and, of course, being in a supercomputer, very, very intelligent. But, as I said, it's not quite idyllic, and I'll explain why later, but first on to the other parts. It's also the story of Joshua Valiente, is it his name? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Pronounce it? That's not a word. Pronounce it. Joshua is another great character. He's not so interesting as Lobsang, and despite actually being a flesh and blood human, in my view he's a little less warm than Lobsang. What we do see though is his growth. Throughout the entire series he's grown from a young boy who would run away from his problems to an adult who tried settling down and couldn't do it, to in this one being a fairly grown-up adult. And I say grown up, he's actually 50 years old, so he's really had to grow up, who doesn't run away from his problems and tries to face them, and when he can't, he accepts it. He acknowledges his problems and his shortcomings, and he learns to live with them. He learns about his family, and this is where the interesting part of the human plot comes into it. We learn about Joshua's ancestor. I think it's his great-grandfather, but it might be another great one back. To be honest, time isn't something I'm very good at, so don't quote me on that. But there's something called the Knights of Discorporea, or Discorporea, again, Greek isn't my forte, although I much prefer it when I can make the joke Italian isn't my forte. Doesn't really crop up very often though. Shame really. The Knights of Discorporea are stepping spies in Victoria, England. Think a bit like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but with alternate dimensions and no vampires. Although that would be rather cool. I reckon that the Knights could in fact be an excellent book series on their own, and I'm hoping that Baxter decides to continue these, but I doubt it, because I get the feeling that, much like Lobsang, it was Sir Terry's idea. And unfortunately, as the cover to this will attest, Terry Pratchett was the acclaimed creator of the best-selling Discworld series. He died in March 2015, which made me sad to read that part. And then we get into the non-human side of the plot. We get the Next. The Next are a super intelligent group of post-humans. They are supposed to be the next step in human evolution. And it raises an interesting question which is not discussed often enough, whether in real life or in science fiction. And that is, what happens when something new comes along and we are the Neanderthals? Do we sit idly by and let ourselves be wiped out, becoming little more than a blueprint for their skin? Do we fight back and do we obliterate them or fight each other to a standstill? Do they go and seclude themselves to keep themselves safe from the rest of humanity and us from them? Or do we learn to coexist? They're questions that are absolutely fascinating, and ones that I hope we never ever have to find out, because knowing how people react to new things, I fear we would fight and wipe each other out. And lastly, I'll get back to Lobsang. This is my favourite part of it. How to explain it though, because this is the part where it gets into real high science fiction, and by that I mean science fiction of the sorts Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and yes, Stephen Baxter wrote. In fact, The Time Ships was written by Arthur C. Clarke and Stephen Baxter, great book, and it features a concept which does pop up in here, and that would be a Dyson sphere, something that I think is a fantastic idea and an actual very real possibility, something that could be done and perhaps should be done. I'm not going to explain what a Dyson sphere is because it'll take a very long time and it's a rather complicated idea, but I'll leave a link to a page describing it down below. The reason Lobsang's world is not so idyllic is because that particular world he settled on, that version of Earth, in the great chain of the long Earth, intersects with another chain, a chain of different worlds, and from that other chain come something very interesting, some very dangerous and powerful alien technology. Cyborg von Neumann probes. If you don't know what a von Neumann probe is, think of 2001: A Space Odyssey. He lands on the planet and it keeps self-replicating. It's a self-replicating biological machine designed to colonize other worlds, or in the case of this one, to convert it. But not in the religious sense, more in the matter transformation sense. And in order to stop them from spreading to the rest of the world in the long Earth, Lobsang has to call in all of his allies, in all of the humans and the Next, all of them, to try and deal with it. And the ending is such a Pyrrhic victory, because we lose some old friends, and there's nothing they can do to stop what's happening to that Earth. But then the absolute ending, with what happens to Lobsang, oh my goodness, it's really, really good. And there's so much potential in it, and therein lies the problem. The ending is too open, and I reckon that there needs to be something more, another book. And in fact there was going to be, there were initially planned to be 5 books, but there were only 4, The Long Earth, The Long War, The Long Mars and The Long Utopia. But of course, Sir Terry's passing makes that practically impossible, because the idea was originally his. Baxter could continue it, but I don't feel it would be carried out quite so well as Sir Terry brought the humanity to it that was needed, while Baxter brought the real heavy science fiction. I would recommend this book to anybody over the age of 15, although I dislike age labels because I was reading books far beyond me when I was 7 apparently, although I don't think they were beyond me. My teachers did though. That's why I left that school. Alternatively, if you're younger or much older and you just happen to have an advanced grasp of theoretical physics and science fiction constructs such as the Dyson sphere and von Neumann probes, then this is for you. Don't read it or any of the series if you're looking for another Discworld, because it's not like that. It has its funny moments, and in fact Lobsang is the source of most of them. But it is really heavy science fiction. If you're a fan of any of those ones I mentioned, Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, and even Philip K. Dick, although less so because Philip K. Dick was more centred on the human side of things, then this book is for you. I'm really looking forward to something more from Pratchett, because this was enjoyable, but the ending for it being so incomplete is why it's only 4.5 stars. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please click like and subscribe. If you'll go over there, you'll find 2 of my other videos, and down there is my book recommendation, which is not the same one from earlier this week. It is, of course, The Long Utopia. Go ahead, go and read it, enjoy it. Speaking of enjoyment, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope I haven't been too, what's that word, lacking in structure, but my mind is not a particularly linear place. It's a sort of mad brainstorm all the time. And by storm I do mean ideas flash across it like lightning bolts with no control. I just have to sit there wherever the wind takes me. It can be fun, and other times it's scary. Speaking of scary, I have to go and watch my brother in a performance tonight, and it's a musical and I'm afraid he just can't sing. I'm sorry, Alex. Anyway, till next week, cheers, bye.